details. And the details of what this person looks like, what they like, what they dislike, what their pastimes are. And the main purpose that this is being done is that we're trying to awaken our attraction towards God, not in a vague way, but in a very, very specific and a very, very personal way. Our whole process is trying to engage in a relationship with God, with Krishna. It's not just a philosophy. This is not just a spiritual practice. We're actually trying to engage in a relationship, person to person, which really means me and Krishna, and you and Krishna. So it's not abstract and it's not theory, but it's very, very personal. Many of you have been practicing for so many years to precisely do this one thing, and that is to try and get into a relationship with God. The rules and regulations that we follow are not an end to themselves. They are valuable and they are helpful, but they're primarily there to help us purify so we can actually start to access this relationship. But the rules and regulations are not enough. Our relationship with God is the goal. And it's important that as we go about what we're doing, we remember this, because this is how we achieve the success of what we're trying to do. This relationship with God, which is the goal of what we do, the relationship is actually ras. It's actually what gives us our taste and enthusiasm. And as we practice a spiritual process in the material world, it's very difficult. We're not in a favorable environment. So how does one maintain one's enthusiasm for this process? And that actually comes through this relationship, through these exchanges where we actually feel nourished. So it's important that this is not neglected, that we don't become impersonal in our application of this process. It's very, 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 very personal. So this relationship with God, with Krishna, is based on our desire. If we want to serve God, no problem, God will reciprocate with us. And if we don't want to serve God, but if we want to enjoy separately, still, Krishna will reciprocate with us, no problem. Because Krishna is very, very kind. He's in a loving relationship with us. He wants to be kind to us. He wants to help with us. He wants to reciprocate with us. But he does it without any force. This is a free will. Love is really free will. He will not force himself upon us. He will not impose himself upon us. So he's going to reciprocate with our desire. So as we go through spiritual life, as we go through life in general, we have to actually ask one real question of our life. And that is, what do you want? What do you want out of this life? What do you want out of your relationships? What do you want out of your spiritual practices? Because this is actually what Krishna is looking at. The desires that we have, they actually determine what kind of life that we lead. And we have to question, do we want Krishna or do we want something else? Because our desire is actually our sincerity and our truth. We presume we want pure bhakti. That's why we're doing this. There's that assumption. And we assume also that is the basis of our relationship with Krishna. But sometimes it's tested what our desires really are and what our motivations in this process really are. And sometimes we may see that it's not what we thought it was or what we told people it was. I'll just explain a personal situation to help illustrate this a little bit, and hopefully open up a mood of some honest reflection of where we're at. So for several years, I had an issue which was causing me some strain and stress, and it was affecting many aspects of my life. And I would pray, and I would to Krishna for help, and I would chant for help with this. I thought it was getting in the way of my bhakti. I thought it was getting in the way of my material. I thought it was getting in the way of a lot of things. And this, I prayed and I chanted and I read and I tried to get some help from the process, Krishna to help me to answer my prayers. And I didn't get it. And my enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness started to wane. And my heart somehow wasn't in it as much as it had previously been. And the question was why? Well, why am I losing enthusiasm? And it was because Krishna wasn't giving me what I wanted. And I had got three realizations from that. One was that my relationship with seva and seva to Krishna was transactional. In other words, I was doing my part and I felt that Krishna wasn't doing his part. So therefore, my relationship with Krishna became strained. The other was that I realized I wanted peace and happiness more than I wanted Krishna. And that was quite sobering. Because Krishna is not our order supplier, as Prabhupada says. He is not there to fulfill our prayers. That's not the relationship that's there. It's not a transactional relationship. It's a free will relationship. In other words, bhakti is service without expecting returns, because that expecting returns is business and it's transactional. And I was doing that, and other people may do that too. I had these expectations, and when they weren't being fulfilled, it really made me reconsider what I was doing and why I was doing it. If I can't get help with these crucial elements of my life, well then what am I doing? And it was good for me to see that I was so disturbed that I wanted the peace and the happiness more than I wanted to do service to Krishna. And the third thing I realized was that it's okay. It's okay because I can only want what I want. I can't artificially want pure bhakti. If somebody wants pure bhakti, I'm very happy for them. It's a wonderful thing. I'm sure the reciprocation with Krishna will be ever increasing. But I didn't want pure bhakti. I wanted relief from some suffering. And I realized that was okay, because that's where I was at. And I also realized that Krishna understood completely where I was at. He wasn't obliged just to fulfill those desires, but that's not a problem. He understood, and he has his will, and he's completely independent. And he may not help me, but he understands. And I do not, and this is the point that I really want to make, I did not need to abandon my relationship with him. And since then, my relationship with Krishna has become cleaner, and it's more sincere and more honest. And so I can relate to Krishna, understanding I'm coming to offer something without any expectations in return, because I realize that's not how this process works. This is not, it's a very high standard, I must say that, and I do have desires and I do want them fulfilled, but this is not what our movement is about, and it's not actually what this process is specifically designed for. It may so happen that along the way we get all our desires fulfilled by Krishna, or through Krishna's authority to sanction other people to fulfill our desires. But that is separate, a byproduct, and that cannot be the goal. Well, it can be the goal, but it's not exactly specifically what this process of bhakti and what the movement of ISKCON and what Prabhupada was trying to teach us. So it really is a test sometimes to see why we're here and what we're doing. I mean, of course, the good news is that Krishna accepts us no matter what. And, you know, an honest, materially motivated relationship with Krishna is better than a fake devotional one, because you can't really build a relationship on a lie. And when we start, I definitely in the beginning was everything for Krishna and nothing for me. It really was like that. And for many years, it was like, well, whatever it takes, just for you, Krishna, just for you, Krishna. But it's not so cheap to stay in such a high level. That's a very, very high and advanced level of surrender. And over the years, it became clear that I wanted some other things. And then it became a question of, well, how do I deal with those other things that I want, and do I deal with Krishna? So this is an interesting dynamic, and we are always working this out. And along the way, I would encourage us to always keep Krishna there, even if we're not pure. Satchidananda Swami makes the point that he says, if you're going to chant, if you sit down and chant, bring both of you to the chanting, which he means your fallen self as well. Don't pretend that your fallen self doesn't exist, because we are divided souls, and we mustn't pretend that we're not. And so when we come to perform our practices, we should try not separate. We should openly and honestly present ourselves to Krishna and to the deities, because they know anyway who we are, but we shouldn't be divided. This not separating ourselves from Krishna no matter where we are is very, very important for a wholesome relationship and a sustainable relationship, because it's actually based on the truth. We should offer everything we do to Krishna. As Prabhupada encouraged the drunkard to see that the wine is Krishna, if you're drinking, don't separate yourself from Krishna because of your guilt. Understand that he's not separate here. This concealing behavior that we have sometimes can lead to some problems. It's better to be honest, because the truth is the truth. And the concealing, anarthas, they like to grow in the dark. So we want to bring out who we are, so the anarthas can see the sun of the truth and they can burn away a little bit, because this concealing is not a very healthy position. So, because Maya is the illusion that I'm separate from Krishna. That's what Maya is. So it's not Krishna is not separated from you because you're sinful. The separation is when, the illusion is when you think there's no Krishna. So we need to, because of our pride or our guilt, or I'm not so sure, but we often separate these lives, and that's not very healthy. Let's bring Krishna in. He's seen it all. He accepts us. He loves us. He knows all of these things. And that'll make for a healthier relationship. Because the base standard that's often presented, or that we presume, is very, very high. We present celibacy, even in Grihastha ashram, it's practically the regulations as they are, it's practically celibacy. So we have a culture of very high Brahminical behavior that's expected in terms of the study of the Shastra, the worship of the deities, the rising early, the chanting of mantras. So this is all very, very high. And we often fall short from that. But we have to understand that a non-Brahminical lifestyle, or even a sinful lifestyle, is not a disqualification to perform bhakti. It's an important point that bhakti can be performed under all circumstances. And what we're trying to do is encourage bhakti. Not that we think, unless I'm practicing on a very high platform, then I can be practicing fully. Because what will happen is that we fall away. So in other words, you don't stop your bhakti. You don't stop your bhakti. You don't stop trying to serve no matter what your condition is. You keep that up. That is the lifeline. And there is no hard and fast rule for that. So you keep trying that. Don't remove Krishna from our life because we feel unqualified or we feel guilty or shameful. It's very important. The all-expansive and inclusive mood of Mahaprabhu is that anybody can perform bhakti. And that bhakti is important because it's the key. It's very much the key. Kadambakana Swami gives the example of how one has a shoe that's too tight. And often these standards that we have, for a lot of us, it's just too tight. And we can survive for a while with these too tight shoes. But after a while, you can either get bigger shoes, which has more room for your less advanced behavior, and you continue, or you take the shoes off. In other words, you just leave. And it's the same principle that if you pull the reins of the horse too tight, the horse will buck. So in our sincere attempts to make great progress and in our belief that we can do it, we often have set the bar quite high. And when we fall short, we become a little, we lose our enthusiasm. So sometimes it's better just find a bigger pair of shoes, find a wider room, a wider area for us to play in, so that we can stay and gradually, progressively get purified and naturally start to function on a higher platform. One thing that we can tell by where we are is if in this practice of bhakti, are we becoming softer hearted? Are we becoming kinder? And actually, are we becoming happier? Because sometimes we're strained in our so-called following, and we're a little hard-hearted because it's such a strain for us. And we're really white-knuckling it. And unfortunately, that's not a long-term solution. And sooner enough, something will happen. And it's important to look at the medium and the long term. Because we're not only looking at the medium and long term in this life, for many of us, it's going to be a few lives. And you want to, because what happens is that the people leave and they become hot, and because of various reasons, they become offensive or they become critical. And that's really detrimental. That's really detrimental. But that's part of that concealing. All of these toxic things start to come. So our goal is to stay, no matter where we are, but to stay, to offer service, to be kind to the devotees, which you can do at any stage. If we look at a triangle, and then at the very tip of that triangle, we have the Brahmins and the sannyasis and the initiates. But underneath that small tip is a whole, by far the majority group of people. So we have to acknowledge and deal with and encourage all of those people in that triangle underneath that tip. Because although one moon is worth many stars, we still are concerned with the stars and all of that underneath. And, the monastic life is for the small tip of that triangle. But for everybody else, they need to know, have the language and the encouragement too, so that they can keep going. If you look, there's that podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, with Kaustubha Prabhu and Raghunath Prabhu. And if you hear that, they're having Bhagavatam class every day at 5 a.m. They have thousands of people who watch their Bhagavatam classes. And I don't know of other Bhagavatam classes that are getting 1,000 people watching. So something is working there. But one thing that they're definitely doing is that if you know, you as a devotee of ISKCON, we're not used to seeing Bhagavatam classes like that. And the whole language that they're using, the whole way that they're preaching, they don't even use that word, but the whole way they're discussing Bhagavatam is very, very effective. And one of the things that they're doing is that they're acknowledging the large part of the triangle that often that we don't. And I think it's important that, I think, because the idea is to maintain our relationships with Krishna in all varnas and in all ashrams and in all circumstances. That means acknowledging sometimes where people are at and not only talking in the worlds of high Brahmanical culture. Because it's not that easy to also live in a high Brahmanical culture. It's not easy to live as a high Brahmin if you're not living within a high Brahmanical culture too. And many of us aren't. You know, I live in Alachua. It's a town in Florida. It's not a Brahmanical culture. Thankfully, there's lots of devotees there, so we're trying to, you know, raise the whole culture of the place, but they're a small, tiny percentage of the place. So this maintaining your relationship with Krishna is very important under all circumstances, and understanding the all circumstances of where we may be in our lives and where everyone else may be in our lives. So the other point that I would like to talk about is relationships and not results. So Krishna doesn't need anything. Krishna doesn't need us to open a temple. He can open 100 temples without even batting an eyelid. So Krishna doesn't want our results, because ultimately he's responsible for the results, because he's the ability in man. So he's doing the results. So we're not offering the results. So he's done that. So he doesn't want that, because that's his already. What he wants from us is our love and our heart. That's actually what he wants, which is our mood. And often that love and that mood is shown through our relationships with devotees and also people in general. Just as a side point, again, that love and that correct mood is not just exclusively that we show that to the devotees. We show that to everybody. We need to not isolate. These are these are Krishna's children too. Everybody, you know, the meat eater, whatever, he's also Krishna's child. And how we deal with him is also part of our relationships. So this broad-minded approach to understanding that Krishna is everywhere, and we are relating to Krishna by our daily activities with everything, is actually a real show of our relationship and our love to Krishna. So a project done in the right mood is actually successful, even if it fails externally, because we don't actually control that result again. So our job is to try and maintain, because I was in a situation once where I was with a devotee and we were working on some area where I had an expertise in that area, and it wasn't going very well. And I was realizing that this project's going to not really work so strongly, and I was getting upset and irritable. And somehow, by some mercy somewhere, I got the idea, maintain this relationship, do not break up the relationship. And so I just let go of the result of it, and I kind of was more amenable, and I still maintain that relationship with that devotee today, and I'm very, very grateful for that. And that was really helped me to see that it's really important that the relationships are the results that we seek. Because we're relationship, bhaktis too. We're the relationship movement. We're the personal movement. Studies have shown that the happiest people are those that actually have meaningful relationships. No matter your wealth, your prestige, the meaningful relationships, communities of meaningful relationships, this is where our happiness lies. Because we're personalists like that. And it's hard because generally we're self-centered. I'm definitely self-centered. I'm definitely concerned for my own well-being, for my own convenience. And it's hard to always be dealing with other people who have their own conditioning, and sometimes our conditionings don't match, and you don't want to have to, it's just easier not to deal with that person. But actually that's the austerity we need to perform, is trying to deal nicely with people. That's actually the real austerity. That's the real austerity. Yes, fasting, yes, chanting many rounds. There are many austerities we can perform, but as personalists and as bhakti and as devotees, maintaining good relationships, cultivating good relationships, in spite of the difficulties, not taking offense when someone's conditioned nature clashes against our conditioned nature, that is an austerity that I would encourage us all to try a little harder at. And I definitely, with myself over the years, would like to try harder and harder at that, because I think that is a heart softener, and I think it's very, very pleasing to Krishna. And ultimately, with these relationships, we're really looking at Krishna. You know, it's such, Krishna can seem so distant. And our prayers, I think Satchidananda Swami calls it the great silence of God. We're praying, we don't hear anything back. And it can seem a little distant, and how do we continue on with such a distant relationship? Frankly, sometimes it seems one way. But part of it is to understand the who of Krishna. Who is Krishna? What is he like? The verse is talking about what does he look like? What does he like? What does he dislike? Why is he doing these things? And then also from our side, who am I? What do I like? What do I dislike? Because this self-realization and acknowledging who we are, this self-realization often goes hand in hand with God realization. They're very, very linked. And we're trying to have these open relationships with Krishna and these discussions. And sometimes we become a little impersonal with ourselves. In a neophyte understanding, we feel that we need to neglect ourselves, or that our needs are indulgent. But it's very hard to practice bhakti, which is giving yourself, if you don't really know yourself that well. And it's also very hard to practice bhakti if you're sick or if you're depressed. And sometimes you need to deal with these things that are happening to you and not neglect yourself to think, oh, it's illusion to care for my mental health. Because that will come around and really backfire, because you won't be able to. It's very hard to, if you're sick, if all of you know you've been sick, it's really difficult to chant your rounds in any good consciousness. So we need to acknowledge where we're at. We need to acknowledge the bodies we have, the minds we have, the conditioning we have, the relationships that we have, and try and work that within our relationships, and not artificially just separate or think we can neglect them, because unfortunately you have to deal with this stuff. You really do. You really do. I am the offering. I am what Krishna wants me to, what Krishna wants me to offer. Ultimately, this every single one of us here, the billions of us here, you have a unique relationship with Krishna. You can give Krishna something that nobody else can, and he will reciprocate with you like nobody else can. So this personalism goes both ways, to Krishna and to us. So, and know that we're good. Krishna loves us. It's good. You know, we don't have to think that we understand that we're conditioned. This humility. So there's one mistake that we made. We just wanted to enjoy separately from God. So therefore, out of his kindness, to reciprocate with our desire to, enjoy separately, he created the material world for us to try and do that. But that's the one mistake. Everything else, there's not a mistake on our side. It's all understandable to have lust, anger, and greed and be conditioned because you're in the material world. What do you expect? That's not a problem. That's not the problem. We're trying to do something about it as well. So we can just chill out a little bit on the guilt and the shame, because, it doesn't help. It really doesn't help. Humility is not low self-esteem. We are wonderful and dynamic children of God. And that's a truth. That's a Shastric truth. And we should align ourselves with that truth, not the Western guilt or these strange things that we put upon ourselves. And the thing is about understanding that and knowing that we're wonderful and dynamic children of God, is that it gives us enthusiasm. And enthusiasm is very, very important for trying to continue on the current of the world is taking us downstream. So the material world, you have to make progress spiritually, you're actually swimming upstream a lot. So you need enthusiasm and some strength. And part of that is knowing that you're a child of God, fully dynamic and fully awake. So we need to have a little trust in ourselves and be our cheerleaders and our personal champions. You know, we chose this Krishna consciousness movement. Isn't that a wonderful thing that we've done? It's great. And no one forced that upon us. Every single person here had made some decision, looked at all the options of the world and decided, actually, I want to try and serve Krishna. So you can make good decisions, and we're making good decisions. So we can have a little trust in the deepest parts of ourselves. We know what we're doing. Yes, there's some conditioning. Yes, there's some karma that has to play out and things. But don't worry, that's not our identity. The deeper part of ourselves is well situated. So there are keys inside us, individually as well. Satchidananda Swami talks about, if you're reading, say, for example, if you're reading the Srimad Bhagavatam and you read about the rose scent that drifts through the forests of Vrindavan, for example, and you like that, he makes the point, don't continue reading. Read that again and try and explore this thing that you like, because this is often a key that can open a door for us to go deeper and deeper, because these things that are attracting us, they can lead us into a paradise, into a whole relationship with Krishna, a whole unique relationship with Krishna, because we're not robots who just serve and read and chant, and we just don't think about what we're reading and why we're serving and how we're chanting. We actually meant to get these little keys, and we meant to go a little deeper on that. Many of you have been practicing for decades, and that spiritual boot camp where you just negate and you just put your head down and you just break down through all the conditioning, that's valuable, but it's not the way we stay always. We also have to start looking individually at our relationships of who we are and who Krishna is to us. This is actually the goal of what we're doing, is to try and understand this relationship. Because, you know, Krishna's right here in the heart. He's closer than we think. And this personalism is important for us. It's really, really important. This is the whole point of these decades of practice, is to start narrowing that gap a little bit. Yeah. So wherever it takes you, maybe it's not the rose scent that wafts through the forests of Vrindavan. Maybe you're a Nrsimha Bhakta, or a Hanuman Bhakta, or a Ram Bhakta. But the point is, where you feel some attractions, naturally and simply go and see where that leads a little bit. There's no force required with natural inclinations. Let your heart be your guide. It's simple and it's natural, and you'll start seeing our attractions and our rust which is very important. You know, ISKCON and Prabhupada, we're not just a factory for producing one product. It's the process of awakening love of God, and it's very, very broad and broad-minded, very, very broad-minded. I'm always so amazed and impressed at how broad-minded Srila Prabhupada was. Because in the one sense, we can be very strict and very, very specific, but on the other hand, very, very broad-minded. And these contradictions, these paradoxes, actually, the spiritual world and Krishna and the soul is big enough to handle all of these paradoxes. So we don't need to break our brain too much about them. Just on this point, I know it's running a little late. So on relationships and not results. So previously in this canto, we were reading about Daksha and Shiva and that pastime. And the one thing that Daksha did was that he put results over relationships. You know, he was Daksha's expert. He's expert at these rituals and how to apply the rules of worship to get results. And then, but when he saw that Shiva didn't stand up, in other words, didn't follow the rules, he was criticizing Shiva and chaos ensued, you know, and this is all because he put the results over the relationship. So this is the Daksha and Shiva pastime is very informative on this point. Relationships. You don't get blinded by the external following of the rules. You know, Shiva was completely absorbed in meditation on Vishnu, which is what Daksha was trying to get to. Shiva was already there, but Daksha couldn't see that because he was blinded by the rules. And another point about this Daksha and Shiva pastime. So Daksha was very prideful and very expert at his rituals. And he was doing all of these things incredibly, which we think, wow, it's a Paka Brahmin doing such good yagyas. But he wasn't pleasing people. And then he was humiliated by his offense. And he got the head of a goat, which is pretty humiliating. And then Daksha saw through his humiliation, he saw the error of his ways and he got enlightened and he started to offer these elaborate prayers to Shiva. So what we can see from that the humiliation that Daksha underwent was very, very helpful. It killed his false ego. And we all know that the false ego is our number one obstacle. And this humiliation can often kill that false ego. So, and it helped Daksha, went from external offensive to deeply heartfelt prayers. So, you know, I know that we don't want to pray for humiliation, but there's often real kindness when a situation that feels so humiliating is there and we're so like outraged. But actually, personally, I've felt that the suffering and humiliation has really helped me a lot, although I didn't like it and I don't want anymore. I can at least intellectually accept, actually, you know, I accept it was really good for me. And I think Daksha is in the same position here. And then just one more last point about the Daksha and Shiva pastime, and Shiva in general, is that we really should not dismiss Shiva in any way. As milk is to yogurt, Krishna and Shiva are very, very similar. We're not spiritual neophytes, only Krishna, only Krishna, only Krishna. This broad-mindedness needs to understand and acknowledge the position of somebody like Shiva. And we can approach Shiva, we can pray to him, he's in charge of the material world. The material world's a very difficult place, it's very hard to get out of here. Shiva can help us here. And not only here, Shiva's there at the Rasa dance too. He's granting access. He can help us. So please try and understand the glories of Shiva. When Lord Chaitanya was traveling through South India, he came upon a Shiva temple there and he got absorbed in ecstasy. And he sung the Sri Shivastikam, 8 verses in glorification of Shiva, which you can find at Murari Gupta, Sri Chaitanya Charita Mahakavya. That's where you'll find that. So yes, thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you so much, Prabhu, for asking me to speak. It's purifying for me to study a little bit about Lord Shiva and to try and prepare a class. So thank you very much. I'm happy to ask any questions. I'm not sure what your timing is like, but thank you.
Thank you so very much. I think I speak for all the devotees. I heard your very sincere and heartful explanation. And although I think we have to set you up for another class because I think you just gave this one for myself. So perhaps you can talk to everybody about something that relates to others as well. I think the devotees, I see Queenie has a question and Dacia has a question. Dacia Prabhu, can you unmute yourself and ask?
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth, for taking your time out. And yeah, thank you for all your years of service to kind of help us to also experience this wonderful movement. Yeah, I guess the class was a bit striking. I mean, just I think most of us will agree it's a little different than what you usually hear. Just in that, like you mentioned, usually we kind of hear more about the ideals and maybe not so much about like it being okay, maybe not being able to strive for those ideals. Or not being able to meet those ideals. And I guess I'm just a little concerned because when I hear these things, I mean, just realizing that our conditioning as Westerners is very strong, and we don't have much maybe like good habits to fall back on. And it seems that our spiritual practice is very the ideals that the practice that Srila Prabhupada gave. It's a very intensive practice, and I think the reason for that intensive practice is just to kind of overcome these these conditionings that we have. So I guess, I guess I don't know. I'm just a little concerned because if I think the practice itself is what actually allows us to maintain the standard, the four regs, and kind of the full absorption in Krishna consciousness. And because we know our Christian friends, they're very they're also they're all about building the relationship with God and kind of giving yourself to God, but without this strong spiritual practice to actually keep our consciousness elevated, it seems that we also might like kind of start slipping into that kind of practice that they have. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts. If you like to share a response, if that was clear, if I need to.
Sure. Yeah, I get the gist of what you're saying. Yeah, you were talking about the intensive practices, and the thing about intensity, it's not a sustainable position. You have a whole life to lead. And what does your Krishna consciousness look like on a Tuesday afternoon when you're a grihasta? That has to work. That has to work. I was a brahmachari. I lived years in the temple and lived that, and I think it's an important platform. And I think that those people who are able to maintain intensive practices like that top of the triangle, where they're able to do that, they are the moons by which we go to for nourishment. And they are there for us to help us and to provide an example and to provide encouragement. And I strongly encourage anybody who's able to do that to please keep doing that. It's very, very valuable. We need examples of pure people living the pure life. 100%. So yes, please. But what a lot of people find is that it is an artificial position to maintain over the long term. So then what do? My point is that, no, don't leave. Remain enthusiastic. Keep doing what you can do. And because that's what my experience is. Yes, fine for a couple of years, but then what? Then almost nothing. And I think partly because we're not dealing with the long haul. You know, it's parallel tracks, and it's not to undermine, and it's not to sentimentalize, but it's actually not artificial either. And that intense practices, you know, for a sannyasi now, he's not feeling intense. This is natural for them. It's a natural life that they want to lead. The practices aren't intense for them. It's not, and if people are like that, then of course they will go and they will do that. I'm just making the point because a lot of people fall short of that. And the psychology and some of the problems that come are from not talking enough about how to deal in those areas. It's not, they're not mutually exclusive. We can all live together. The renunciates can live with the grihastas. All of the intents can live with the laid back. And it's not the one has to beat the other, or one. We're, you know, like they were saying, and I lived in Mayapur for several years, and they were like, there are different schools in Mayapur for the kids. There's Maharaj's ashram, there's an international school, and there's a Bengali school. And Bhaktivedanta Purnima was making the point we should have many schools. Why? Because there are many kinds of people. Not just that everybody goes to Maharaj's school, which is very, very intense, but that's for those people. And then there's another, and then there's another. So that if you can't go to that school, it doesn't feel like, oh, these schools are worse or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So it's for everyone. It's for everyone. I'm just specifically talking about where I'm at and where I get from my experience, see that sometimes when people can't reach the high, they lose all enthusiasm. And I think losing enthusiasm is the greatest killer. It really is. You really need enthusiasm. And if somebody comes and he's just offering a tiny thing, we should encourage like anything. So I hope that answers something.
If I may add something, I was a brahmachari for 17 years, and I can honestly say that my last couple of years as a brahmachari was just out of pride. And in my time, it was equivalent to suicide to put on white when you had saffron for so long. And I kept going because I'm stubborn, not because I was spiritually advanced. But then I finally realized this is not working for me. And I tried to finagle my way out of getting into the Grihastha ashram by trying to convince my guru that I should wear black. I should be in a kind of transitional, non-existent ashram. And he said, no, you have to be connected to the Varnashram system. And there is no fifth Varna, there is no fifth ashram. So you can remain a brahmachari or be a householder. And I actually made a decision. The day I made a decision to be in the Grihastha ashram, I went out like I usually did to set up a book table. And I was incredibly successful, like never before. Why? Because I plugged myself back into the Varnashram system. And I was basically shadow boxing for a period of time. And now I had a punch because I actually connected myself back to Krishna's idea of the Varnashram system. So I think, you know, we should not practice Krishna consciousness out of pride. Any other questions, please? Queenie, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, Mukunda, Prabhu. Yeah, it was very heartfelt and sincere. Like Savatma Prabhu said that, I think it's very fitting. And my question is sort of somewhat similar to Dasa's question, Dasa Prabhu question, because you said one thing, that a sinful life does not disqualify us from practicing bhakti. And I was reflecting that So a sinful life usually I think that when we live a sinful life, it's easier for us to forget Krishna. And so that's why we practice these regulative principles, because they're protecting us. And so, so how is it possible for someone to live a sinful life and still practice bhakti? Like they may still be able to render some service and still have desire to render some service, but it's not gonna quickly get them advanced. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, good, interesting. So what's more powerful, living a non-sinful life or performing bhakti? So we know that performing bhakti is more important than, it's like the monkeys are vegetarians, right? So what's vegetarianism? That's nothing to do with us. So bhakti is what's important. And that's what we need to encourage. And how you encourage bhakti is you say, everybody, please, wherever you are, come and perform bhakti. Not that you hear, now I can perform bhakti. That's my point. Not that we should live a sinful life. That's not the point. The point I'm making is bhakti, bhakti, bhakti encourages the people to perform bhakti. Bhakti is very, very powerful. The purification you get from bhakti is far more powerful than the purification you get from being a vegetarian or whatever. That's my whole point about this stuff. That's not as important as bhakti. Yes, it's important, but not as important as bhakti. And that's the whole point about daksha. This is my whole point of this whole thing. It's not to say, oh, no, if you're going to meet someone, they're doing sinful life, do you want to say to them, oh, stop performing your sinful life? Or do you want to say to them, please perform some bhakti for us? And that's my point. We want to say, please perform some bhakti for us. Let the bhakti purify them. Not that we're on the, anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying.
Thank you for the makes total sense.
Any other insights or questions or realizations or comments? Actually, I had a very startling realization today before we started this Zoom video that Prabhupada left saving the world in our hands. And that was a startling realization that shook me to the core. How are we gonna raise ourselves to the standard? You know, having talked about you can practice bhakti in any condition and you shouldn't bring guilt and shame into the relationship and so on. But we have a very large task ahead of us. How do we go from where we are at, wherever that is, to be instrumental in helping Prabhupada save this world, which is more very obviously going to the dogs in a hurry. That was a question.
Oh, to me? I'm sure there are people here that can answer far better than I can. I mean, it's a tall order that I certainly wouldn't. I can't answer that. I'm sorry. That's for someone else to answer. I think I'm just trying to save myself and the small people around me. You know, my wife and kids, and that's for you more bold and empowered preachers.
But I'm sure you have an opinion.
I think I have a lot of faith in ISKCON. I have a lot of faith in the books. I have a lot of faith in the devotees. I think it's slowly happening. I really do. I think we're adjusting with the times, which is a little overdue. I mean, I mentioned Wisdom of the Sages podcast. I really think that, you know, people vote with their feet, they say. You can just tell by the numbers who's listening to Bhagavatam class and why are so many people listening to that kind of a class. But I also think that, you know, the moons are very, very crucial and valuable. These deeply absorbed people who've given themselves fully, their influence in the world can be incredible. I have a lot of faith actually in the process and in ISKCON and the devotees. And I do think in due course, we will save those who actually want to be saved. yeah, we just have to keep enthusiastic and keep doing it. That's my thing. We have to keep doing it. It's extraordinarily potent bhakti, extraordinarily. So that's why my thing is, please, everybody come, just perform a little thing. And perform a thing that they want to perform. That's very, very potent when somebody, and it's very easy, you know, somebody, if you're engaging somebody with somebody that they like, something they like to do and they're doing it for Krishna, there's no strain here. Often the strain is because we're not intelligently thinking about how to do it. But I really don't feel qualified to talk on this. I'm sorry.
Anything else, Prabhus? Are you going to let him go now? He's kindly accepted our invitation.
No pressure, please.
Yeah. We have a. Oh, Krishna. Oh.
Never mind. It's okay.
The conch blew, but I guess maybe if someone from outside wants to continue.
He has a question.
You can just mute yourself and point the camera towards the deities so we can see when the deities are opening, and if there are any more, if there is any interest from any of our illustrious audience as well, please present it now.
I have a question. Thank you so much, Mukunda Prabhu, for your class. I really, really appreciate it. And my question is, how can we be more honest with Krishna with all of our stuff? That's what I've noticed is hard for me. It's easier for me to do that with devotees, but I have a lot of trouble doing that with Krishna, even though he already knows it. So how can we be more sincere in praying to Krishna with whatever we're dealing with, even if we don't feel like it's a good thing we want to bring to Krishna? That's my struggle.
You should know that he has seen everything and he still loves you very, very much. Maybe you do have a conception that he's going to be like a father figure who's going to be upset with you. He's very happy to see his daughter. Of the millions of things she could be doing, she's listening to a Bhagavatam class. He's so happy. Krishna is, if you can imagine love and kindness, understand where that comes from. It comes from Krishna. So you're in very safe and loving hands. He wants to have an open relationship with you. You'll make him happy by being honest. We're fortunate. We have a great friend in Krishna. Very forgiving. Seen everything 100 times. He's with us. He's our champion. He's encouraging every day. He's so happy to see you in class asking questions.
Thank you so much.
I saw a hand raise. I think it was Jagannath Pandit, Prabhu. You want to ask something? By the way, this is her father. So I think.
Hare Krishna. No, I was just clapping that yes, as a father, yes, I'm proud of her. She has more sincerity than I do. I just want to thank you for your very authentic and powerful class. I got a lot from it, and one of the things I was thinking about was how one can navigate with sincerity when there is inner conflict about how to move forward with their life at a particular time. Like Sarvatma Prabhu was talking about the process he went through in the 17 years and what the last 2 years was like. But when you're in the middle of that, it's like so difficult. Any advice how to navigate that for people?
Yeah. It's a hard one lesson from my side, and I'm really not good at it, but It's really just patience. Because sometimes there is a period that can last a month or it can last 20 years where karmically it's going to be a mess or it's going to be turmoil or whatever. And you just have to be patient. Because actually the poet Hafiz, he was a Sufi poet, he says there's no big move to make. We overemphasize our ability to do things. So we put such a lot of pressure on ourselves that it must be, what is the decision I must make? It's crucial. But it's actually not so crucial, and these things get revealed. And sometimes we won't know, and we just have to be patiently let it play out. Like if in Savatma's analogy, so he said the last 3 years or whatever was, he was just staying through pride and he should have left or whatever, but he didn't. So you'd think, oh, maybe he should have left 3 years earlier, but it didn't matter. So he got realizations, so he stayed longer, and now he got the realizations of what it was like to have those 3 years where he shouldn't have gone, and now he is where he is, no problem. It's not so intense. We have been through billions of lives. You know, it's incrementally progress is happening. Of course, there's a bit of a fast track now that we're performing bhakti like this. But externally, often it's a mess and we don't know. And we can just be patient and chant our rounds and know that ultimately we're safe. And if we can't think of it, what can we do? I don't know the solution. You know, we can inquire to the guru, or we can read Shastra, but sometimes there's no answer even then. So then what to do? Like Krishna, okay, so I chant Hare Krishna. You know, it goes to help to know your nature a little bit. So I'm a very controlling person. So for me, patience and not controlling was very valuable. Maybe someone is very passive and they need to act a little more. That also some self-knowledge about who we are can help to see, oh, I'm doing that thing where I'm not acting where I should be acting again. But generally, we'll often patience because it gets revealed. It gets revealed. And sometimes, as I said, 1 month, sometimes 20 years. We're not in control of this. We have a lot of karma that has to come our way. And it's a rocky road.
If I may add a little tidbit, I should perhaps remember that Maya, as powerful as she is, will never throw a test our way that we cannot pass. That's not the purpose. The purpose of Maya is not to kill our bhakti, is to actually make us stronger. So any test that comes your way, no matter how big it is and difficult it seems to be, is always meant to be passed, because that's what Krishna wants. She's just making us stronger. Anything else, devotees? Come on. Well, if there is no more questions or comments, realizations, there is one from Gideon. Let's see. Let's hear it.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. I just wanted to say thank you for your class. You answered a lot of questions I didn't even know I had. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening.
So if there is nothing else for the time being, please unmute yourselves and express your appreciation for Mukunda Prabhu, who gave us so kindly his time and wisdom. And we'll see you tomorrow on Zoom as well for Nityananda Trayodasi, where Sri Prahlad Prabhu is going to address us at 7 in the morning, as usual, as in Bhagavatam class. So please express your gratitude now and be kind.
Thank you.
Haribol. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very inspirational. Thank you.
Can't wait for the next class.
Waiting for the
Yeah, I
next
hope you
class.
can turn and speak for us.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. We're good?
Yes, we're good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Haribol.
Thank you.